Hello everyone. In this video we are going to see about the organization of the processor. So to understand the processor's organization, first we need to understand few things, and what are the requirements or what the CPU must do. So the first one is there are five things that the CPU has to do, or the requirements of the central processing unit. The first one is the fetch instructions. So the meaning is the processor has to read the instruction from the memory. So memory may be either it may be from the cache memory or the main memory or the register, whatever it is. So the first thing, it has to read the instructions from the memory. The second one is interpret instructions. So we know that in an instruction format we have the fields called opcode as well as the address field. So the opcode will tell us what is the action that has to be performed by the CPU, and the address field will give you the details about where to fetch the operands. So the instruction has to be decoded by the CPU to determine what action has to be performed and what operands has to be retrieved. So the third one is fetching data. So to execute the instruction, the CPU has to read the data from memory or from the IO module. So it is based on the details given in the instruction, the address details given in the instruction. And the fourth one is the processing the data. So after retrieving the data or the operand from the memory or the IO module, the execution has to start. So mostly the execution will be performed by the ALU unit, that is the arithmetic or the logical operations will be carried out in the ALU unit. So the data fetched from the memory will be processed based on the instruction. And finally writing the data. So after execution, the results of that process has to be written into the memory or it has to be sent back to the IO module. So these are the requirements from the CPU. Now to do all these things, the processor needs to store some of the data temporarily. So that means the processor needs some internal memory. So if you see in this figure, there are two figures given. The first one is a simplified view of a CPU and the second one is a detailed view of a CPU. So in the simplified view, we can see that the CPU is connected with the system through the system bus. So the CPU has three major components. We can see there the ALU, the registers and the control unit. So this is a very simplified view of a CPU. And the second figure, it shows the detailed view. So there we can see there the internal CPU bus which is available that connects the ALU and the registers. So what this ALU and registers are having? So ALU basically it performs the arithmetic and logical operations, and the control unit it controls the movement of data from the registers to the ALU as well as to the through the system bus. So it controls the operations of the CPU. Now in the detailed view we can see that so the ALU will take the data only from the registers. Okay, so the operands will be stored. We have already seen the registers like memory address register, memory buffer register, IO address register, IO buffer register. So all these registers were available carrying the data or the address. So the ALU is going to take the data from the registers present inside the CPU. So there should be a internal CPU bus which helps to transfer the data from the ALU to the registers. And also we have the other control paths communicating the ALU and the registers. So these are the major components of the CPU the ALU, the registers and the control unit. So this registers or temporary storage which helps to carry out the operations done by the ALU.